that Joshua went and destroyed the Anakites from the hill country, from Hebron, Debir, and Anah, from all the hill country of Judah, and from all the hill country of Israel, Joshua totally destroyed them and their towns. No Anakites were left in Israelite territory. Only in Gaza, Gath, and Ashdod did anyone survive. So Joshua took the entire land just as the Lord had directed Moses, and he left it as an inheritance to Israel according to their tribal divisions. Then the land had rest from war. Joshua was a soldier with his armies. He actually destroyed 20 kingdoms. Every man, woman, and child, along with their king. We now go to Matthew, chapter 8, verse 5 through 10 and 13. When Jesus had entered Capernaum, a centurion came to him asking for help. "Lord," he said, "my servant lies at home paralyzed and in terrible suffering." Jesus said to him, "I will go and heal him." The centurion replied, "Lord, I do not deserve to have you come under my roof. But just say the word and my servant will be healed. For I myself am a man under authority with soldiers under me. I tell this one, go, and he goes, and that one come, and he comes. I say to my servant, do this, and he does it." When Jesus heard this, he was astonished and said to those following him, "I tell you the truth, I have not found anyone in Israel with such great faith." And in verse 13, Jesus said to the centurion, "Go, it will be done just as you believed it would." And his servant was healed at that very hour. This is the word of God for the people of God. Wow, what faith that centurion soldier had. "For I am a man under authority with soldiers under me," he said in verse 9. It has become commonplace for the church to talk about peace in recent years. In fact, dozens of church statements have been issued for the purpose of condemning war. And this is entirely appropriate, since Christ has charged his people to be what? To be peacemakers. We hear that in verse 9. In a world in which is weary with war. I think that would describe today's world, don't you think? But amid all the verbiage of ecclesiastical pronouncements, the church has been nearly silent about its soldiers. It's as if we have nothing to say to the people who risk and give their lives for us. You see, the soldiers seem to be lost in the shuffle as the church grapples with the larger issue of nuclear war and global peace. For myself, I think it's time that we said something on behalf of our veterans, our soldiers, and our first responders. It's time we spoke about peace, not just in political or moral terms, but in human terms as well. It's time we spoke before God about good soldiers and bad wars. We might begin with the benefits one can gain from being a soldier. Peace activists in the church are often too elitist to see this. Many of our young people are clearly helped by the direction and discipline that they get in the military. I know that I was, and I'm sure all of our veterans out there were as well. They learn habits and lessons in the armed forces which serve them well for the rest of their lives. This is precisely what we see in the Roman centurion who talks to Jesus. In his case, he's a soldier whose military experience has taught him something important about his faith. What do you suppose that was? Picture him as he makes his way towards Jesus and imagine how the crowd murmurs its disapproval. You see, they don't want this soldier of Caesar anywhere near Jesus. Something like our Secret Service protect our president. But the crowd's disapproval gives way to the confusion that's around him. And then astonishment. Because the centurion seems different somehow. He isn't cursing them and he's not pushing them around as the other soldiers did. In fact, he speaks respectfully, even reverently, to Jesus. He even removes his helmet. Most incredibly of all, this Roman centurion is calling Jesus Lord. Did you catch that? He said, Lord. He says, in effect, Lord, I know your people hate me. They hate everything I represent. They despise the empire I am sworn to defend. With all the evils of Roman rule, I know I'm not even worthy to ask you into my home. But please, Lord Jesus, my beloved servant is very ill and lies near death. If you would just stand here and say the word, I know he can be healed. He says, in effect, Lord, you are the one that can do it. I have faith. Then the centurion uses his own military background to explain his faith. He goes on to say, he says, I am a man under authority with soldiers under me. When I tell them to go, they go. And when I tell them to come, they come. And when my superiors tell me to come, I come right away. So too, Jesus, can you order my servant to be healed? I kind of paraphrase that, but that's in essence what he was saying. You see, the centurion's world is governed by a chain of command. And because this is the world he lives in, this is also how he understands his faith. Just as a captain has authority over a private and a general over a captain, so too does Jesus have authority over all things, seen and unseen. Jesus is the ultimate commander-in-chief. Simply by issuing the order, he can heal the centurion's servant. This is what that soldier believed. You see, the Roman soldier has learned his faith through the language and the lens of the military. But his faith, he has learned, is true. He has learned that Jesus is Lord, a supreme officer to be obeyed. And Jesus is impressed with this. In fact, he says to the centurion, not even in Israel have I found such faith. He goes on to say, it is done for you. Your servant is healed as you believed. Now, today we live in a society which teaches us in so many ways to love ourselves and to look out for number one. Well, that's not what Jesus taught, is it? And that's not what people learn in the military either. Right, Vic? I believe it's the Marine Corps that says, there will be no man left behind. And in the paratroopers, we have a similar saying. John 15, verse 13, Jesus says, greater love has no one than this, that he should lay down his life for his friends. And countless soldiers have done just that over the years. They threw themselves on top of grenades or covered the flank on a dangerous mission or in some other way paid the highest price. They died young on fields of battle over all the continents of this world. Their examples of courage and self-sacrifice could well be learned by many Christians today, who are neither cold nor hot. Revelation 3:15. And who live their faith somewhere between comfort and commitment. You know people like that? There are other lessons good soldiers can learn, like love and loyalty, which is the story of two Air Force pilots who were shot down on the same day over North Vietnam and taken prisoner. Listen to this. These two men who had never met before were put into the same prison cell because one was a Southern white and one was a Southern black man. You see, the Vietnamese knew that about racial relations in America, to think that they would hate each other and make each other completely miserable in their own tiny little prison cell. The Vietnamese were particularly interested in the black pilot because he was the first African-American prisoner that they had taken. In their eyes, he could serve a useful propaganda purpose back in the United States. So they tried for more than a year to make him sign a statement. They took him out every day for beatings and torture, but he refused to sign. At night, they would bring him back to his cell, and that's where something happened, which surprised the Vietnamese. The two prisoners came to need each other deeply. The black man needed the white man to care for his wounds after his beatings. The white man needed the black man for his courage and determination in the face of the enemy. And these two men became indispensable to one another, almost of the same spirit. Now, it's years later, and they are both back home, safe and sound. Just recently, they visited the Vietnam Memorial in Washington, where they stood there, locked tightly together, arm in arm, as close as two people can be. And they cried as they found the names of long-time lost friends. Folks, it seems churches are very good at saying pious words about racial understanding, but their deeds rarely match their words. But put most churches to the test and the truth comes out. Yet here are two men, one white and one black. Here are two soldiers who have become more than brothers. They love each other completely, even with their lives. More so than most Christians, these soldiers have the kind of love that Jesus is talking about. Yes, we in the church ought to have more to say about good soldiers when we talk about war and peace. We ought to recognize the Christ-like values which can be found everywhere in life, even in the armed forces. But then we must ask, what happens to them? What happens to these good soldiers? The answer is, they are sent to fight in more wars. Listen to these words written by a soldier looking back at his own experience of war. He says, what kind of war do civilians think we fought anyway? We shot prisoners in cold blood. We wiped out hospitals, killed and mistreated enemy civilians, finished off the enemy wounded, tossed the dying into a hole with the dead, boiled flesh off enemy skulls to make table ornaments for sweethearts or carve their bones into leather orders. Not every American soldier or even 1% of our troops committed these unwarranted atrocities. And the same might be said for the enemy. But the wars necessitated so many so-called crimes, and the bulk of the rest could be blamed on the mental distortion which war produces. The mental distortion which war produces. Do you think that was written by a Vietnam veteran? You know, they've gotten a bad rap, haven't they? As if somehow their war was the only generation of soldiers who committed atrocities. No. These words were written by a veteran of World War II. A veteran of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. He fought in what we Americans naively call the good war. Now, even in our text from Joshua this morning, we see how wars were fought thousands of years ago. Israel plundered cities and burned them to the ground. When enemy soldiers ran for their lives, the Israelites tracked them down and slaughtered them. They killed every man, woman, and child they could find. If you've ever read the Old Testament, it's a brutal description of life back then. In fact, the Bible says that they did not leave any that even breathed. Verse 14. Now, General Sherman didn't say war is heck. What did he say? He said war is hell. And so it is. Soldiers of every age have known it. War brings hell to the land, to the innocent civilians, and to the soldiers themselves. We Americans call World War II a good war because we didn't have to fight it there. It wasn't on our land. But if you ask the Europeans or the Russians about it, was it a good war over there? They don't think so. You see, war is hell. War might be necessary on occasion, but don't call it good. Don't ever call it war. War is always evil. That's all there is to it. It's always evil. Today there are Christians in our land who seem to want war. If not with Russia, then at least in Central America or some other third world region where the forces of imperialism and nationalism collide. Moreover, these holy warrior Christians frequently cite texts like this one from Joshua to justify themselves. You see, the Bible is a violent book. Some of us in Bible study were talking about that a few months ago. They say the Bible's a violent book. And God is a God of war. And they go on to say that we are His chosen nation in the battle against the godless hordes, and the Lord will bless our fight with victory. That's what these so-called holy warrior Christians think. Never mind how such Christians ignore all that Jesus said. Never mind how they ignore all that the Old Testament says about the evils of war and the blessings of peace. But they even miss the point here in Joshua. Remember that wherever the Old Testament seems to bless war, there's usually a little clue, just a tiny little clue, somewhere to make us stop and think and keep war in a more sober perspective. In our reading this morning in Joshua, the clue is in the chariots. The chariots. When the battle is over, God tells the Israelites to burn the chariots they have captured from the enemy. Why would Israel do that? At a time when wars were fought hand to hand and on the ground, the chariot was kind of an ultimate weapon, the nuclear bomb of its age, if you will. It was certainly a great leap forward in the technology of death, wasn't it? So why would Israel burn these chariots and voluntarily give up an important advantage in the arms race of their day? They did it to make sure they wouldn't use this new weapon. To the Israelites of Joshua's day, war was fought under God, and God was the nation's security, not the latest weapon. The minute they trusted in themselves for their defense, they were doomed. And this is precisely what happened later, during the age of the prophets. Most Americans could find this unimaginable, but ancient Israel rejected the secular wisdom of peace through strength. They acted faithfully with a form of unilateral disarmament. Now, of course, chariots became crossbows. Crossbows became cannons. And cannons became machine guns. And machine guns became missiles. Today, our chariots are called strategic defense or Star Wars systems. Whether we admit it or not, we are just like every other nation on earth in this respect. We find our security in our weapons, not in our God. And we pay lip service to God, but look to ourselves for our strength. Just like that ancient Israel in the age of the prophets, our nation is not eager to hear what God's servants would faithfully say. Because you have trusted in your chariots and in the multitude of your warriors, therefore the tumult of war shall rise among your people, and all your fortresses shall be destroyed. Hosea, chapter 10, verse 13. It says so right in Scripture. Our nation has it all wrong insofar as state and military are concerned. We should be celebrating our soldiers and condemning war. Instead, we condemn our soldiers and celebrate them. Well, I know we often hear politicians and business leaders praising the courage and sacrifice of our soldiers and our first responders. Whenever I hear these speeches, I want to cry out in protest because I hate the sound of patriotism and hypocrisy mixed together. How can we as a nation praise veterans one day and then cut their programs and ignore their problems the next? Did you know that every 2 minutes in the United States, a veteran commits suicide? Every 2 minutes. This is just what happened to Vietnam veterans since they've come home, and as it happened to the veterans of World War I, II, and other wars before that. It seems we're willing to profit by sending them to war, but unwilling to share our profits with them in peace. And so they are mistreated and ignored. Why our government spent years denying the rash of birth defects in our veterans' children, insisting that it had nothing to do with the chemical weapons we ordered them to use in Vietnam, I do not know. This is a cynical and callous statement, isn't it? But it is a national disgrace which makes patriotic speeches about veterans ring hollow in my ears. I'm very emotional about this because it's very dear to my heart. Meanwhile, the president of Flag Company reports the sales of American flags have gone through the roof, especially during the last several years. This just happened last week. He is quoted as saying, "Our national self-esteem has improved, and it's a good for our business because people are buying better flags and more expensive flags." Man, I wanted to smack that guy. You see, we've got it all wrong as a country. We hate the good and love the evil. We hate the good soldier by treating him shabbily, and we glory in the profits of passions of war. Remember the centurion and all his good soldiers today. And remember how even in the most violent episodes, the Bible does not bless our vision of war. God's words require repentance and a national leap of faith, because it says that righteousness must be our armor and God our defense, even in a dangerous world. Now you will notice a startling and revealing phrase at the end of our text in Joshua, if you caught that or not. When the long battle was over in its final days, the text says this: "And the land had rest from war." The land had rest from war. Israel crushed her enemies with force, but there was no peace for Israel. Only a rest from war. That's all we ever had in this world, isn't it? Is a rest from war. That's all we have today. A rest from war. Because our patriotic bluster and our lack of real faith in God keeps us blind to the paths of peace. And God have mercy on us and on the souls of all the good soldiers who have died in bad wars. And God have mercy on the soul of our nation. And God's people said, Amen. The word of God for the people